All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our informational webinar. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be giving a high-level overview of our Pathways to Inclusive Research Training RFP, and we'll have time at the end for questions that you may have, as well as delving into details that I might not go over the first time, just in deference to our RFP. So I just want to note that the information that we're presenting is accurate as of today, but our RFPs are subject to change, and any of those changes will be listed directly at the RFP link, which is here. We are going to provide the recording from today as well as the slides for you to be able to refer to. So hopefully that means you won't have to take notes and you'll just be able to listen today. And we certainly urge you to refer back to the RFP as the end-all be-all as far as the requirements and components that are required for your proposals. For points of contact for this RFP, myself, my name is Leon Goa. I am the research coordinator for California Sea Grant. The fiscal folks who are heavily involved in the pre-award and post-award process are Rose Madsen, who's our assistant director, and Carol Bailey Sumber, who is our proposal and grants analyst. You can reach us using these emails here, which again are also listed on the RFP. You'll also see in the little bubbles here, Shauna O, who is our director, Madeline Wampler, who is our, I believe, program analyst, Nick Sajabor, who is our fellowship coordinator, and we're all in and out as far as helping coordinate these RFPs. So today our objectives are to provide an overview of the 2023 Pathways and Inclusive Research RFP, to review the important application components, as well as answer questions from prospective applicants. We're going to ask that if you have any questions to please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We are not going to use the chat today for questions, so please do use the Q&A function. If you have any very specific questions that are probably relevant to only your program or your research institution, please do email me at sgproposal@ucsd.edu, and I will be happy to meet with you or talk over email. And I already mentioned that we are going to make this information available after today's webinar. So just an overview of California Sea Grant. If you're not familiar with our program, we are a federal and state partnership and are part of a larger network of Sea Grant programs, which have 34 programs total across the country. We were authorized by the National Sea Grant College and Program Act of 1966, and our mission is to provide integrated research, extension, outreach, and education to help Californians balance diverse interests that intersect with the coastal and marine environments and adapt to changing conditions and needs. We're based in San Diego, which is what that picture from the left is from. So the primary purpose of today's of the RFP that we're discussing today is to support research mentors in developing pilot research programs that broaden participation and a sense of belonging for undergraduate students from groups that are underrepresented and underserved in marine and coastal sciences. In particular, these are identities of Black or African American, American Indian or Alaska Native, Hispanic or Latine, female, non-binary, first-generation college students, veterans, LGBTQIA2S+, and students with disabilities. Now, as far as these pilot research programs and what they can do, we do have kind of a foundation of what we would like each of these proposed research programs to include, and then aspects which we hope that your experience and expertise will mold what your research program actually will look like. So the foundation that we want every program to have is for them to address one or more of California Sea Grant's strategic focus areas, as well as to provide a guided research experience and mentorship to students. Beyond that, we want you to build the rest of the foundation of the house that is your research program. So these really need to create an inclusive research experience, but how you get there can be really up to you. So this might include targeted disciplines, focused community building, like through a fostered cohort experience for the students, as well as through collaborations with external groups such as minority serving institutions, Indigenous communities, and many more. So we do provide a couple examples in our RFP of how you might actually accomplish this. But again, we are really curious to see what is out there, what is possible, and hope that this is an opportunity for people to be able to create these experiences, pilot them, and see what works in this space. So I mentioned our California Sea Grant focus areas. These are all detailed in our California Sea Grant strategic plan, which is linked in the RFP. We highly encourage that you do visit the strategic plan to read through a little bit more about what are each of the goals within these focus areas. But generally, our focus areas are healthy coastal ecosystems, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, and resilient coastal communities and economies. As far as the award information, the award itself will be 1 year in duration, beginning February 1st in 2023 until January 31st, 2024. The funding itself is federal, so it's important that you ensure that your research institution, as well as PIs, can receive federal funding. The award minimum would be as low as $25,000. And remember, this must include indirect costs, which is what IDC stands for. The maximum for the award is $75,000. And again, that's including IDC. We do require 25% of non-federal match. And we do accept match in a couple of different ways. I can give a couple examples here. This includes salaries and benefits of investigators and others paid from non-federal sources, costs of using expendable supplies and equipment already in inventory, cost of boat time supplied by non-federal sources, and et cetera. We have a couple more examples on our website. And if you have any questions about what would count as match, we can field those questions at sgbudget at ucsd.edu, and our assistant director will be happy to talk those with you. Up to a total of $600,000 will be awarded for this RFP, which would be approximately 8 to 12 projects. For eligibility, the proposals must be submitted by a researcher or faculty that has PI status at a California research institution. The program should either support existing competitively funded research or develop new research programs. And we just want to remind folks that both, whether you go with the existing research track or the new research track, these do both need to address areas of interest to California's Sea Grant as far as our strategic plan. We highly encourage submissions from diverse teams led by new faculty, women, non-binary folks, Black, Indigenous, Latine, and other individuals with underrepresented identities, as well as projects that build or strengthen partnerships with communities or organizations that hold similar goals to build inclusive research programs. The timeline for this RFP, the letters of intent are due July 1st, which is coming up. All of our letters of intent and full proposals will be due via eSea Grant, the link to which again is in our RFP webpage. Shortly thereafter, on July 28th, the full proposals will be due, and we do want to remind folks that only applicants who submit an LOI or a letter of intent can submit a full proposal. So if you are interested, please do submit a letter of intent. We are expecting to notify folks of their funding status in October, and again, those projects would begin on February 1st. For the letter of intent, we have a couple of components that are required. It should be no longer than 2 pages, and it will help us gauge the interest in this program as well as the topics that might be submitted to help us form our panel for reviewing the proposals themselves. So we will not provide any feedback for the letters of intent, but we will acknowledge that we've received them. So in those letters of intent, you will need to include the name of the applicant, contact information, title of the project, and a brief overview of the proposed research program, including whether this is going to be a program based on existing competitively funded research, or if it's going to develop a new research program, as well as what strategic focus area of our California Sea Grant focus areas the program will address. And finally, the approximate funding amount that will be requested. If you do submit a letter of intent, then we will open access to the full proposal on eSea Grant, which again will be due July 28th. The full proposal has a number of different components, which I have a table for here, including a signed title page, a project summary, project narrative, key personnel CVs, budget and justification, current and pending support, letters of support, data management plan, and environmental compliance questionnaire, or a NEPA questionnaire, as some of you may know. I am not going to go into great detail about the different components because they are included in our RFP, but I'm happy to answer questions about the specifics of each of these. And I'll just give a couple of key notes about some of them, including things that we sometimes have issues with when folks submit them. So for the signed title page, it's critical that it includes the summary information, including the summary financial request and approval signatures from, that should say just the PI and your authorized institutional representatives. So it is important that your sponsored projects office is contacted early because they do need to sign off on this signed title page. The project summary is one of the most widely consulted descriptions of your project. So it's important that that is written in a way that's accessible and is very concise description of your overall narrative. The project narrative is really the bulk of your proposal and has a number of different components, including, sharing the rationale for your program, describing the program itself, how you plan to recruit and build a research community culture for your students, describe your outcomes and deliverables, and then, of course, provide references. The CVs for your key personnel should be 2 pages per CV. And those are not, aside from the 2-page limit per CV, you can submit as many of them for your key personnel as needed. The budget and budget justification is a very critical component that can be challenging sometimes to enter. So again, please reach out to your sponsored projects office early or contact us if you have questions. All of your budget worksheets will need to be created and submitted in eSea Grant. But we do have a budget workbook that you can download from eSea Grant to help develop your budget and in preparation for submitting it on eSea Grant. So in that, you should be prepared to enter any salaries, wages, and fringe benefits for all personnel associated. And you can also include expected costs for expendable supplies, publication costs, and travel. You do need to provide justification for every single budget item. And we do have guidance on how to write that. So you'll have access to those resources. Oops, excuse me. Okay, so just a reminder, please carefully review budget instructions in the RFP, including the budget limits, the fact that we require 25% match and more. And the justifications should explain all budget items in sufficient detail to enable the reviewers to evaluate how appropriate the funds being requested are. And again, we have our email there of our SG budget account where you can direct any additional questions. I wanted to give some examples of allowable costs. For undergraduates, you can pay for things like student compensation or a stipend, expenses such as research, travel, and professional development, and undergraduate student tuition and remission. But unfortunately, because we are a federal funding source, you cannot pay for room and board. And we have gotten a couple of questions about this, so we wanted to emphasize that student status is going to be determined by the home institution, including whether recent graduates are eligible to receive funding as a student. So for instance, at UC San Diego, our recent graduates can be considered to be students as far as payment, but at some other institutions, they will not accept recent graduates as having student status. So we encourage you to get in touch with the student's home institution to understand their policy on this matter. And we highly encourage that all undergraduate students are being paid for their research work, unless this is being conducted in the context of a class where they're receiving credit, or if payment would jeopardize their financial assistance. There are a couple of other ways that the funds could be used. You can pay for graduate student stipends and or tuition, and that based on our agreements is not subject to IDC. And to be clear, this is not to create a research program for graduate students, but this is if your graduate students were part of your personnel who are running the undergraduate research program. Faculty researcher salary, as well as research and travel expenses, are also allowable. I've seen a couple of questions coming in the Q&A. I will definitely get to those at the end. For the final full proposal components, we would like you to note any relevant, current, and pending support. Letters of support are optional, but we encourage them for projects that are involving multiple institutions or community partners. That just helps demonstrate that you have made connections and commitments with these groups. We require a data management plan of a maximum of 2 pages. And this is essentially a description of the types of metadata and data expected to be created, as well as plans for how you will disseminate and archive that metadata and data. NEPA forms, or environmental compliance questionnaire forms, are also required. You will provide a number of information relevant to the project methodology, location, and you must include permits if you have them for the project itself. If you do not have permits, that is okay, but if you are selected for an award, you will have to provide permits before any research can actually be conducted. So we highly encourage you, if you have permits, to please supply them up front. And if you already have a research program that has a NEPA form that's been approved, you can just upload that existing NEPA form and we won't need to do any further NEPA review. All right, so just an overview of our review process. Once the full proposals are submitted, they will be reviewed by 2 different panels. One will be a technical review panel, and the other will be our resources agency Sea Grant advisory panel. Both of them will be provided evaluation criteria that we've clearly outlined on our RFP webpage, but this includes scientific merit and justification, student research, research community culture, mentorship, and project costs. Once we receive the recommendations for funding from those 2 panels, we then will select from those, primarily led by our director, Shauna O. And our selection criteria, we have those listed online again, so it is helpful to have that for reference, but we encourage certainly that you have a look at that evaluation criteria carefully when you're preparing your proposals. So this is my last slide, just with some recommendations, and then I'll switch back over to questions. So again, reminder, please read the RFP fully and carefully. Please pay attention to the formatting requirements and page limits. If we do receive anything that exceeds a page limit, we can cut it off to reach the page limit, and we would prefer not to have to cut anybody's proposals as they're written. Again, please contact your fiscal administrators, campus research, or sponsored projects office early with any questions regarding IDC or employee benefit rates. We advise that you create and look around your EC Grant account early, so that you're aware of how you will need to upload and enter your proposal components. We will provide some application and budget guidance documents in EC Grant, and we certainly recommend that you refer to those. And again, write with the evaluation criteria in mind. We have our emails there and in the RFP itself for any questions or clarifications that we can't get to today. Okay, great. So I'm gonna move over to the questions. So the first one, does the PI need to be from an educational institution or could they be from a nonprofit? So as long as your institution can accept funding from us, then you are eligible to apply. But it may depend on the nonprofit itself as to whether they can accept federal research funding. So I would say if you are not sure about your institution's status, to please reach out to us and we can determine whether your research institution can receive funding from us. And unfortunately, I don't think I have a fiscal person on the call with us today, so I may have to defer some of the questions to them later as needed. Okay, another question. Budgets are required for the full proposal only, correct? Not the LOIs. And yes, that's correct. You do need to provide an overview of how much an approximate amount of how much you're going to request from us, but the full budget will not be due July 1st. Next question, would funding for personnel at the postdoctoral level be appropriate as a researcher salary, for example? And yes, I believe that is appropriate. I believe it will be subject to IDC, but that is perfectly acceptable. Again, as long as they are helping with coordinating the research program. Okay. Do student stipends need to be justified, i.e. if the costs don't allow for room and board, but we provide a livable stipend that students can theoretically use for room and board? We are an NGO and would be taking students outside of our organization if selected. Okay, so I think, and please, if other California Sea Grant team members can jump in, please let me know. My understanding of what this question is asking is essentially maybe if they can provide like more funding than perhaps would be normally placed for a stipend, considering that it might go to room and board, whether that's permissible, like a bulk stipend. Shauna, do you know if that's okay?
Yes, so for Sea Grant budgets, everything has to be, for federal funds, needs to be justified, meaning there's got to be a budget justification. But the stipend that you decide to set is not something that I believe this RFP is going to constrain. So ask for what you would like the funding to support your students in the way that you would want to mentor them to participate in the program that you envision for them to be included in research. So the answer is yes, it needs to be justified in the sense that there is a budget justification. I'm not sure if that's, yeah. But yeah, if there's more specific, please go ahead and email SG Budget.
Thanks, Shauna. Okay. So the next question, how do we deal with the idea that we might recruit undergrads into existing research programs and that there might be a large choice of research projects that could be done, but the selection of an exact project will depend on the abilities and desires of individual students who we don't know yet? Yeah.
So
go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, I'm going to try, and then I'm going to push it back to Jen Cassell. So it's up to you to be able to tell us in a way that we could evaluate the research that might happen. So I understand the question is that you won't know until the student's identified, but you got to give us an idea for a panel to be able to evaluate the research that may or may not occur. That's up to you. And I'm not I'm not convinced there's enough room in the proposal for you to put the suite of projects you have, but there has to be enough research being conducted in a way that could be evaluated for that scientific merit portion of the criteria.
Yeah, so I would say, Jennifer, that in this description of the applicant's funded or proposed research program, to give us some examples of the nature of student activities, as Shauna recommended. So that's where I think would be a good place to include that. Okay, next question. Do you anticipate that there will be a similar call for proposals for 2024? This is the first time that we have carried out this RFP, and so I don't think we can guarantee anything at this point, but we are really excited to have developed it, and we're interested to understand the demand for a call like this. So, we can always be hopeful, but since we are trying it for the first time, I don't think we can really speak to that. But Shauna.
So this is a question for Ellie. This was on the odd years of funding. We typically do a 1-year project. So I think you've seen iteration of new faculty awards. So this is a little bit of a build on that idea, 1 year. And so as you saw, there is some emphasis given to new faculty. So we for sure likely, it's for us to commit to 24, it's unclear depending on our funding situation. But if this is very successful this year, we will likely have it for 25. So if you recall, you're applying now for 23 funding. So that's what I mean by the odd years. So if we were to repeat this, it would likely show up in 25.
Thanks, Shauna. Okay, I have one question left. If anyone else has other questions, please go ahead and enter them into the Q&A function now so we can make sure we get to those. Oh, and then a couple more came in very quickly. All right, so the next question from Lucy, can training of non-US residents and citizens be supported by this grant? If yes, can the work take place outside the US? So thanks, Lucy. I did see your email about this, and I actually referred it to our assistant director because I wanted to make sure I gave you the right answer. Typically with federal funding, we cannot fund non-US citizens, but I wanted to confirm that with them because there are some cases where if the academic institution is willing to pay non-US citizens, that it might be possible. So this is something that we're going to revisit internally, and we will send out and include on our RFP webpage what the answer ends up being, because I'm sure you're not the only group that's interested in understanding this. But typically, we cannot fund non-US citizens with federal dollars. So I would say for now, that's probably what our answer has to be, but I will get back to you on this.
Leon, let me take the second part of her question about taking the work outside. So if you remember the slide Leon had with the foundation, it also needs to meet our goals within the strategic focus area. So our strategic plan is very much heavily emphasizes benefits to California. So whatever the work or the research is doing, it has to meet some of our specific California Sea Grant California Sea Grant strategic goals. So it's, again, the burden's up to you to justify how that work and the training is going to benefit and advance our objectives in those focus areas for the state of California.
Thanks, Shauna. Okay. Next question. I'm looking for examples of past proposals that have effectively and fairly recruited students of diverse or underrepresented backgrounds. Any suggestions on examples I could call on? Just looking for ideas. As I mentioned, this is the first time that we have run this particular RFP. So unfortunately, we don't have examples of past proposals. I'm trying to think if there's other resources that could be provided, but I don't think we currently have any that we could easily offer, unfortunately.
Maybe we can suggest Daniel reach out to their institutions' programs that address this with undergraduate research, especially in the underrepresented. So they might have programming, and they have the same, obviously, issues and desire to be equitable. And so I would definitely reach out to their institutions' contact for undergraduate research.
I did just remember that the community engaged internship, which is part of the Sea Grant network, they did publish a best practices kind of advice for recruitment that was really focused on their internship program, but it could be something that if it's of interest, we could share with you. But we couldn't say that it's from our office or for this RFP particularly. Okay, great. Glad that would be helpful, Daniel. Okay. Last question that I have here. You mentioned 2 alternative tracks, 1 supporting existing funded research, or 2 developing new research. Are those mutually exclusive, or can proposals to this program combine those 2 tracks to some extent? So that's a great question, Brian. Essentially, we wanted to provide multiple avenues for people to be able to engage with this opportunity, mostly because we understand that $75,000 is a lot for paying undergraduates, but not a lot for conducting new research. So we wanted to ensure that people with existing research programs would feel like they had, they were able to play in this particular opportunity. So I think it's wonderful to add new research to your program that is appropriate. It just means that for us, as far as process, we do have to evaluate your new research as far as how it applies to our focus areas. We would have to go through the NEPA process for that research if your proposal is selected for an award. So it's for us internally, it just means something slightly different if there's any new research components. Okay, any final questions in there or follow-up? Wonderful. Okay, well, we are reachable again at sgproposal@ucsd.edu or at sgbudget@ucsd.edu for any follow-up questions. We're really thankful that you joined us here today, and we're looking forward to seeing your letters of intent that we hope you submit by July 1st. Thanks, everybody.